Hey everybody, welcome to Talking Landscape Photography. We're just getting the show all set up at the moment. Tonight we have a pretty incredible episode, and I might throw it over to Paul for a bit of an intro.
Yeah, I get lump with that a lot. So if you noticed, I'm away from home at the moment. So I'm hanging out with a very dear friend and having some really beautiful, authentic brother time, which is something that I need to put into my life quite regularly for my well-being. And then next thing is going bush. So it was actually one of our audience that actually prompted the show, to be honest. He sort of reached out to me and he just suggested the idea, and
a pretty incredible episode, and I might throw it.
Oh man, I think I've got
You got the browser.
Nick, do you want to jump on, mate? I'm just wondering why.
Yeah, just go on mute, Paul.
I might have done something stupid. I've got it playing in the background somewhere.
That's my trick.
Does this bring back any memories, Adam?
It does.
Awesome.
Well,
Well,
give me a second. It's probably my bloody end. So
yeah, mine's all closed.
Not me.
All right, we good?
So I mean, I guess with photography, it also kind of goes hand in hand sometimes with people, like self-expression, I suppose. And I think it's probably no coincidence that a lot of photographers have had either struggles or sort of been had a, I don't know, I'm not articulating very well tonight, sort of had an approach with mental health issues. And so I think, it's a lot of benefit in us talking about that, both with our own experience and also how we also have used photography as either a medium to help us through those times, or sometimes it may even be an instigator in those times. So it's quite an interesting one. And it's never easy actually working for yourself and using yourself as your own boss and navigating that relationship. And so that's always an interesting part of being a photographer as well, especially if you're doing it professionally. So that's definitely an aspect to it.
Yeah, it's been interesting reflecting on what well-being actually is, and how image making and imagery in general sort of has influence on that. And I think we're just going to have a fairly open night tonight. Some of the guys have prepared some imagery that might spark a bit of conversation, but we're going to let it flow. And as always, if you're in the audience and you feel like offering some suggestions on topics or having a few questions, then please feel free. We'll do what we can to connect with those. But we've got some very, very special men that have very very esteemed places in the industry in this country and in New Zealand as well. And they've all kind of, I guess, over time, been fairly authentic and open about some of the everyday things I've got to deal with being an image maker and what comes up in life. And so we thought, let's just have a big open discussion about it. COVID's kind of accelerated a lot of things and given us a lot of time to reflect, and imagery, has been a key sort of player, and connecting sort of online's been a really big part of the way we've kept well-being alive. And I personally feel like connection with other people in whatever form is one of the most important parts of well-being and mental health. So welcome to Adam Williams and Ricardo Da Cunha and Will Patino in New Zealand, who's going to have quite a late night. And I totally love you guys to bits, and I'm really happy to have you on the show. And Nick's had an interesting day today, so he might do some sharing around that. But it's been interesting, just very, very briefly, just starting the ball rolling, thinking about imagery. Like my first thought, talking to Luke with earlier, is the pictures I take and how I take them in my role as a photographer. And then I thought, well, wait a minute, there's a whole other sort of ballpark of where imagery really impacts my well-being. Like when I see an incredible picture on social media that I'm never going to be able to take, and I go like, oh my God, or some guy kicking ass on something I wanted to do or that comparison stuff that goes on around imagery. There's pulling out a picture of my my auntie who just passed away to sort of reconnect with, a beautiful relationship that I have, and pictures of my family. And there's a place or a moment that might not be a great photograph, but it's a perfect window back into an important part of my life that's been a source of well-being just through experience and memories and that kind of thing. And as image makers, you know, I do a lot of imagery outside of landscape and in terms of documentary, and I'll talk a bit about that later. And I've got some very targeted ways in that I try and actually use the process of image taking for therapeutic practice and well-being quite literally. So I'm going to check in about a little bit about that later. But yeah, it just might be nice to start a little bit with whoever wants to go first. I'll shut up for a while and just you know, just put it on the table. Where do you feel like? What do you feel like the definition of well-being is for you, and how does your time as a photographer, or your capacity as an image maker, or your relation to photographs in the first place, sort of, how does that dance sort of work for you? What role does that serve in terms of being a photographer?
I'll kick it off, guys, if you don't mind. I think for me, the really interesting thing, and it's more of a looking back in perspective, is, you know, I've had conversations with nearly all of you guys about well-being or anxiety or depression, phone conversations, messages, just checking in on each other, that kind of thing. We talk about that openly, and look, that just wouldn't happen. I don't have that kind of relationship with a lot of my closest mates I went to school with, because, you know, they're your schoolmates, and you're a bit tough and you're a bit bulletproof. You've still got that mentality, I suppose, from when you were 15, 16, 17 years old, where, you know, you're all good, you're going to get through it. So it's just brilliant that photography, because I've over the years become, I suppose, really honest and authentic with where my work comes from, because one of the hardest things, absolutely one of the hardest things about anxiety and depression is putting your hand up for the very first time and telling someone, like asking someone, or just saying to someone, look, you know, I'm doing it a bit tough. You know, have you ever struggled with this or that? That can be the hardest thing, to admit that you're vulnerable, to admit that, you know, that's got in and that you're not coping with it really well, can be the hardest thing. So for me, the first step, before I even spoke to anyone about it, was to sort of start putting it into my work, start infusing it into my work. And that was kind of, for me, like the first steps. And then, you know, a few months go by, a few years go by, people start asking, geez, I really dig the dark, moody work you're doing. Where's the inspiration come from? And slowly but surely, now, you know, standing up in front of 100 people or however many people are going to watch this episode on YouTube, I got no problem in saying, yeah, sure. You know, I struggle this year in particular, for example, like many of you sitting at home, I'm sure, has been really difficult, really, really difficult. You know, not only the anxiety and depression that comes and goes as it normally does, but then you load that up with everything else going on in the world. And it's been really exhausting and a really difficult time. But, you know, having these guys and having photography and having somewhere to lean to, and having that creative outlet, which means that I can create and communicate without having to literally talk about it sometimes, is really, really helpful.
That's awesome, Adam. Thanks for sharing that. It certainly has been a tough year for a lot of people. And what I've found personally interesting about it is that when lockdown happened, I actually, it wasn't a negative thing for me like it was for a lot of other people. And it's almost embarrassing to say that, but I'd almost been living in my own personal lockdown already in terms of how I was feeling. I barely left the house in January. And so, you know, I was kind of like, oh, now everybody else gets to know what it's like, which, yeah. So, and you know, you don't feel like you're missing out on anything because no one can go anywhere anyway. But yeah, it's not it obviously not a positive way of looking at it, but it's definitely an aspect that I found with that process and being able to spend that time. So, but yeah, I know for a lot of other people, because they live with others, it makes it very challenging because they're not used to spending so much time together, and can really raise a lot of concerns with people and personality clashes and that kind of thing. So there's certainly going to be, let alone the side of impacts on people's business, which is, as a photographer, is also a huge challenge. you know, especially if you're into more portraiture work and or doing workshops, those kind of things are, you know, it makes things very, very challenging. So there's a lot of people hurting, I guess, at the moment because of those things, and having to pivot and change and very rapidly do something different to what they're used to. And that's very stressful to do that. Is any of you guys sort of had that experience, I suppose, with the huge amount of change in work, and you know, I guess that puts a bit of pressure and stress on you?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, you go, Will.
Yeah, definitely. For sure, there's been a lot of adjustments to make. One thing that I found kind of interesting with myself is that my photography began pretty much the same time that I was diagnosed with depression, around 2012, late 2011. So my photography has always had an immediate relationship with my mental health and my well-being. I just happened to pick a camera up around that same time, and it's always been a part of my journey of recovery and learning and growing and overcoming, you know, such a dark beast. And I've been fortunate that I've really, you know, come a long way over the years to the point where, you know, it's more or less suppressed. But what I found interesting this year, and more so probably in the last few months, is that the one thing that has always helped set me free and give me that peace and clarity, which is photography and going out in nature, I've really lost the motivation for that for the first time ever since I picked up a camera. And I have the freedom here in New Zealand to go out and photograph as much as I like. There's no restrictions. I can't run my workshops, and my entire year's worth of work is currently on hold. But that aside, I can easily go out into the wilderness and do the one thing that I love and the one thing that has helped me so much over the years. But for some reason, I've just lost that drive and motivation. And I've put it back to a few different things over the last, you know, year or 12 months or whatever. But I've really found it important along the way in my journey is to just constantly keep checking in with myself and also those closest to me. So mainly my wife, obviously. Communication is just such a powerful thing. And I found lately the not so much photography, but just other visual arts has really been inspiring me. I've actually taken a step back and got off social media. I don't have any apps on the phone, and I've more just been looking at books and finding resources that way. And I found that quite liberating. And, you know, so even just in the respect of, I've learned that, you know, we absorb so much in this day and age. We're constantly cramming things into our brain every minute, every hour, you know, whether it's the news or visual arts, photography, whatever it is. And the beautiful thing about photography is that it gives you the ability to switch off from absorbing and start extracting. You know, you're out there and now you're getting something out because you're looking, you're thinking, you're creating. And yeah, I found for me, just along the way, whenever I've hit a bit of a hurdle, is just trying to review stuff and say, all right, why am I feeling this way? Why am I feeling that way? And trying to, you know, action whatever it is going on. And at the moment, it's been, really good to just switch off. And I've been picking up a paintbrush and doing some painting and just doing some really weird, different stuff. And man, it just feels really good to, just to give yourself the freedom to explore those things, whether it's photography or not. I think it's important not to suppress, you know, those creative outlets, because it is such a powerful thing. And I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't, you know, obviously if I didn't pick a camera up, but, you know, the place I was in many years ago, the camera itself it's changed the way I view the world. And yeah, I'm just so grateful and thankful for that gift that it is. And I always say to people, it's one of the best hobbies in the world, because it really does change the way that you view the everyday environment around you, and for the better, for sure.
Do you want to flesh that out a bit, Will? I was just thinking about how, sorry, Nick. I was just thinking about how having a camera in your hand sort of alters your relationship with the world. And I think for me, I start noticing things I probably otherwise wouldn't notice. The little specks of light or the movement of a tree or the splash of a color or the way things align or the juxtaposition of things. And I think it just brings me more alive, and it gets me more engaged and sort of out of my head and connected with the world around me. Yeah. And sometimes that's
totally agree.
yeah, it took me a long time to realize that that was quite an unconscious thing at first. And now I sort of feel like I start to notice it actually happening. And I sort of started making a habit quite a few, or many years ago now, of having some sort of camera on me always. And this is way before phones were any good. I always had a point and shoot in my pocket. I don't know, about 10 or 15 years, just to make sure that if that opportunity was there, I could choose to engage. And it's sort of, yeah. So it was interesting, Will, you talked about how it transforms the way you relate to the world. Nick, did you want to follow through on that? You had a...
Yeah, just to kind of expand upon that, for me, when I had depression, when it was at its worst, one of the definitions I would use to try and describe how it felt was as if the color in my life had been removed. I really felt like there was just this weight and pressure just constantly pushing down on me, and there was just no color in life. There was no ability to feel joy. And, and people probably, if you've never dealt with depression, or anyone that's had it, I guess on the outside looking in, you might think, oh, they're just sad. But it's just a totally different thing. Depression is just a whole different beast, which it's just like there's a cord removed from your head where you just cannot feel that outward joyous emotion. It doesn't matter what's going on around you. And yeah, when I picked the camera up and just started, when I lived in Wollongong, just drive down the beach and watch the sun come up, and mate, it'll bring me the tears if I really elaborate on it. But, just watching the sun just come up and skim that light across the surface of the water, you watch the darkness just start to come to light. You notice little birds flying around, you notice the way the spray and the waves get illuminated in the sunlight. All these little things that I never even, as you said, I never would have looked at or pondered or considered prior. And then looking at life through the lens suddenly enriched my life and slowly brought the color back. And as you said, now it's given me an ability to see the world in, three-dimensionality, four-dimension almost, and now I don't even need the camera with me. I'm always saying to my kids and my wife, oh, look at this, look at that, look. And they're like, come on, Dad, and I'm observing these details. And I feel like, photography, it helps you feel like you win almost, because I can go down the lake and just sit there and just be content, just looking and observing. Whereas the Will Patino from 12 years ago, before photography, I would have been bored out of my brain. Like, come on, get me off to the next thing. Let's go. Like, I want to go interact with something, something man-made or technology. But now to be able to just go out in nature and enjoy those real simple, pure moments, which are free as well. It's completely changed me from the inside out. And it's something that I think about it a lot, actually, all the time, I haven't picked a camera up in a few months here, in all honesty, but every day I'm still looking. This afternoon I'm looking at the clouds, I'm looking at the way the wind shapes the clouds, all these things. If someone looked at me, they would think, man, that guy's high. Because I'm always just looking around, but I love it. I absolutely love it. And it's such a gift, the way that it helps us see the world like that. And for everyone here that has picked up a camera, which I'm assuming is everyone that's watching this, the more you do it as well, it just completely enriches your life. And then sorry to go on a tangent, but then when you can start to maybe translate how you're feeling or whatever into the work, so then others can look at that piece and maybe get a glimpse of your soul through there. It's just like it's like the pinnacle of what it's all about for me, to be able to, take what I'm feeling, whether it's happiness, sadness, whatever, and try and put that in an image where you're working directly with nature as well. It's like, and the beautiful thing is, when you're in these moments, photography, I always say to my workshop clients, it's like meditation, because you get in that flow state. You're so in the moment, you're trying to line something up and you're getting the settings, the exposure, the focus. The brain is not capable of thinking of all those external influences at that point. You can't think about your boss at work or your redundancy or your cousin, that's whatever it is, whatever it is that's getting to you, or even just mental health in general, which you just can't really control. But when you're honed in on those moments, it does seem to just clear it all out, because you're just so focused. And that's what I found with me really helped big time. Was it wasn't until maybe I put the camera down and went back to my car or whatever, and then it would be like, oh, okay, now I'm back in the real world. But I had an hour and a half where I was just completely zoned out and in a meditative state, basically. And it's still like that today.
I can relate so well to that, Will. Everything you said, even down to telling the kids about, oh, come and have a look at this. Isn't this great? And the kids going, oh, Dad.
Dad. No, but how good is it though? Every now and then, my son's only 5, but every now and then he'll say, Dad, look at the light. Like he's seeing it now. And I just, you know, I just go give him a big hug, and then he's probably like, come on, mate, leave me alone. But it's pretty awesome.
No, that's spot on, mate. Everything you said is very similar to my own sort of feelings about it. But you know, we all are so different, and our experiences are different, and mine are completely different to the rest of you guys and probably everyone else that's watching. It's interesting going back to lockdown and how it affected us. Well, you know, I've got another job. I don't do photography full time, and my job is secure, so it didn't affect me with work, with financial pressures, with clients cancelling workshops, nothing like that. But what did affect me was the day that they announced in Tasmania that they're going to close all the parks and reserves.
I remember that.
Yeah, and I that really hit me very hard. It was suddenly the reality then. It was like, I can't just go up the mountain like I do all the time. Mount Wellington at the back of Coonawney, at the back of Hobart. I can't just go up there. And I actually just said to my wife, I said, they're closing the parks at midnight. I'm going up right now. And I went straight up and did a sort of a final farewell sunset, not knowing when the next time was going to be that I was going to be allowed up there. And that's a really minor thing compared to what everyone else has been going through. We've got deaths, we've got unemployment, we've got mental health issues, all that sort of thing. But it was a big thing for me, and it was a realisation that I just lost part of my security blanket, part of what kept or keeps me, on the right path with my mental health and things like that, because photography for me is an escape from what I do for my job, and I'll talk about that a bit later. But suddenly I realised that I was going to have to cope without being able to go out in the bush and take photos, or just sit there and admire, all the small details that Will was just talking about. And that's what I do. I just sit there and wonder and look at things and see the smallest things. And sometimes I take pictures, and sometimes I don't take many pictures. But I'd lost my security blanket, and I was pretty upset that night. I had a bit of a teary up there on the mountain, and the world suddenly became very uncertain for me for things that I wasn't expecting would ever happen. But again, in the real world, it's only a small thing, and people that saw that, in fact, there were people that actually commented, because I took a little video up there and had an expression like this in that video, and a couple of people were sort of suck it up, Nick, it could be a lot worse, and I guess it's true, but for me, in my personal situation, that was the big thing.
And it's interesting what you say too there, Nick, in terms of how that moment really sort of changed how we thought about what our role is and what we're capable of doing in that moment. And for me, it was a realization certainly that we could no longer go out into the parks. And then it also made me realize that as photographers, we now can bring that to people and help them feel like, help them experience these places virtually now, I suppose, rather than in person. And so for me, it actually gave me a lot of purpose in a way, feeling like I could now get back onto social media, which I was neglecting quite seriously, and actually share some of the world's beauty with people and use that as a kind of a vector for hopefully just brightening people's day and making people realize that even though they can't go out there and enjoy these beautiful places, at least they can still see them and think about them, and they still will be there. So I certainly was able to take that from that. But yeah, it was definitely a big kick in the guts, and I certainly agree with why they did it. But at the end of the day, it doesn't mean it's easy.
When I think about that from a bigger picture perspective, historically through culture and through time, you know, it reminds me of what how the Aboriginal people sort of speak about, you know, the importance of being able to access the land, to be on country is absolutely critical to their well-being and their livelihood. And they're very clear about that it's not just a luxury or something you might do now and again on a holiday. It's like blood and water. And without it, you just die. And so that, you know, I think maybe unconsciously for some of us, more consciously for some, taking away that capacity to go and connect with wild places was huge. And as landscape photographers, it's something we kind of almost take for granted to some extent, but it kind of is in our blood. It is what we do. It is what keeps us going. It is what brings us alive, and it's our great passion. And
it's one of those psychological things too, Paul, where even if you weren't actually planning a trip, the fact that you couldn't even plan a trip anymore was just like the double whammy. Like it's not only it's just not even an option. So I think that's psychologically that really takes its toll.
It was big. It's like you were saying earlier, Luke, like you're hinting at the idea of us needing to adapt, and I think, you know, we're all forced to in a way. Like I started noticing the flowers in my back garden more, and the sound of the birds in my neighborhood, and the way the sun reflected off leaves of certain trees, and when fruit was bearing, and all these things that I just wouldn't notice normally because I was always thinking I needed to be out somewhere further away in the bush or some amazing place. All of a sudden, my access to the natural world was in my back garden, and that was kind of about it. And in a lot of ways, that was kind of really beautiful to slow down and bring my awareness into a much more focused sort of space, and sort of start to really appreciate the local access, you know, and living in a place like Hobart, which is a very deliberate choice for me because of its accessibility to wild places, is probably as good as anywhere on the planet. And I'm very clear how important it is to my well-being that you know, I had to adapt as well, and I feel the better for it. And I don't.
That's how this show started as well, Paul. From those sort of feelings and you know, wanting to connect and still be in contact with people, even though we were separated. Yeah.
Yeah, connection to country and connection to people. I think they're two key aspects for well-being. I think for all human beings, some more than others, but I think they're critical. Rick, have you got a thought about your role? I mean, you live in a city and you don't necessarily get away as much, but it's also an integral part of your work. And you know, what's your relationship with spending time on country?
I've been thoroughly enjoying what's been some of the, I guess, people's viewpoints, and I think Will said it really well before, where for me personally, in a demanding, stressful job, for me, nature is provides a form of meditation for me, just to escape into nature, and it's a reset for me. And I remember as when I had a job that was perhaps more stressful than I have today, I used to find myself, the more demanding it was, the more I would find myself escaping on the weekends into nature. And just, I love nothing more than switching my phone off, leaving it in the car, and just benefiting from that liberation of just being completely immersed in nature. And I think Will said it so well. It's when you get into that Zen state, that present in the moment, you just start witnessing all these details around you, just the creatures, and witnessing how the light's interacting with the landscape. And Will said it so well, you forget about anything. You're not thinking about in the past and the future. You're just immersed in what's happening. And certainly for me, I think some of my most content moments in my life have been in nature, just on my own, observing the colours in the sky. I remember years and years ago, probably 10 years ago now. I was in Eucla, which is on the border of Western Australia and South Australia. And I was out photographing the sand dunes there all by myself. And there was this incredible moment that brought me to tears. And that was, I saw a dingo that came out from the back of a sand dune. And it was a pretty special moment because you don't get to see dingoes often. And rather than running away, the dingo was curious and was just watching what I was doing. And without a word of a lie, a couple of puppies, I'm not sure what the actual word is for baby dingoes, but they came running out, and all three of them just sat there watching me. And I just didn't even feel like taking a photograph because I was just so overjoyed in the moment, and the sun was setting. And I feel that nature is a really powerful healer. And I feel that majority of us who live in metropolitan areas have lost that connection with nature and the wonderment, the healing properties that nature can bring our lives. Majority of us live in condensed, dense housing, a lot of us in apartments. And I feel like with technology now, we've lost our connection with nature. And I think that's a really sad thing in our society. I know certainly in parts of the world, for example, for example, South Korea and Japan, China, people in those cities, they could go a whole year without seeing nature. And I think that's incredibly sad because as humans, that's what sustained us. That's what's provided our sustenance all our lives. And only really in the last 10 or 20 years, with this surge in technology, we've just lost touch with that. And for me, nature is a powerful healer. I find at times that I'm feeling highly anxious or stressed. That's when I know it's time to get out and with the camera as well, a bit like Will said, when you've got that camera, you enter another world. And I've grown as well, where in the past I would be hell-bent on trying to get a photo, but now I'm quite happy if I return back to the car without hitting the shutter. For me, getting photos is just a bonus to the experience of being out in nature. And I know that it recharges me and I feel much calmer after my time in nature. And really, it's an essential thing for my life. Where I'm currently living, I'm about 45 minutes from where I can really classify it as nature. And obviously, I haven't been able to get out more than 5 kilometres for the last over 100 days. But in that regard, I've been very lucky because in addition to photography, I use running as a form of meditation for me as well. And it is also another way for me to get into that meditative state, which sounds ridiculous when I tell that to people, because a lot of people say when they're running, they're just trying to breathe. But for me, it's another vehicle for me to restore that sense of calm that I increasingly need. For those of you who don't know, Jim Carrey, the famous comedian actor, he's actually now a really incredible painter. And he paints big scale paintings and just a very evocative, charged with these very clear underlying message. And he's got a quote. I guess I really enjoy quotes. And I think that it really speaks to what we're talking about, whether you're in nature or you're post-processing, because for me, post-processing is another vehicle to getting into that immersion, where I'm immersed, I'm present in the moment. I could, and I know all the guys that are on this panel and the guys that are listening as well, I think we can all agree that we can quickly burn 3 hours post-processing an image, and we just lose track of time, and because we're just so engrossed in what we're doing. And I think that reset for the brain is just so powerful. And I'll get to this quote from Jim Carrey, and it goes like this. I don't know what painting teaches me. I just know that it frees me from the future, free from the past, free from regret, free from worry. And that's what photography is to me.
I just reflecting on, we've used quite a few analogies. We were talking about time and we were talking about the past and the future. And to me, the word that just sings out amongst pretty much all of what everybody said is being completely and fully present. And we use the word being in the moment. We use the word, not worrying about the past, not concerned about the future. And I think that's not a new concept, but I think it's one of the most challenging things to do regularly. And it takes a lot of practice and quite a bit of self-awareness, and sometimes some teaching and skill. But I think for photography, for all of us, in some ways, it brings us into that moment, because you can't operate in this world, as Will very clearly said, without being right in the moment. It just requires all of your being to engage, and that lets the rest of everything drift away. And I feel like those areas that drift away are the areas that challenge our well-being. It's dwelling in the past and dwelling in the future that really muck around with our headspace and our sense of positivity and well-being. And it's a part of life. We have a past and we have a future. But I think training ourselves to be more and more present in the moment, and in this case, using photography as a medium to do that. And I think, music and cooking and painting and song and running, there's so many different ways to do that. But I think it's a beautiful thing when you recognize the actual living, real, accessible tool that you have in this camera, and that connection with that then brings you out into the world and what's around you, that it creates this thread of connection, both to the moment and what you're being present with, both internally and externally. And I think that's one of its great strengths.
Yeah. If you don't mind, sorry, mate.
You're
just right. On that point, Paul, there's one thing with all of us universally that keeps reminding us of our past and putting our mind on the future and getting us out of the present, and it's our phones. The phone is constantly making you think about something yesterday or making you think about something coming up ahead. And one of the best things I've ever done was deleting Facebook off the phone about 3 years ago, getting rid of YouTube, Instagram. I can just delete it and then just download it when I want to upload a photo, and then just hop back off. And by doing all that, there's nothing on the phone. I pick the phone up and there's just nothing to actually open. So therefore it'll stay in my pocket. And if I'm walking to the shops or something, I'm actually in the present now, because I'm looking at the sidewalk, I'm looking at the birds. But if not, it's very easy to pick this up, or maybe it's at dinner or whatever it is you're doing. And the good thing where I live is once I drive 4 minutes down the road, there's no phone service anyway. And it's awesome, because it just forces you now to, if you're going out with the camera, it's a national park, so there's just no service anyway. But I've taken that because I realized, man, I'm more in that present moment, and a big factor is the phone is just not even an option because it can't work. So I've taken that into the household now, and even my wife and I, there's no phones in the bedroom, turn them off at night, put them up on the cupboard, don't turn it on until, in the morning we've got up and spoken and seen the kids. Now I'm going to turn it on after I've done the important things. And it sounds silly, but I tell you what, for me, it's really, it's changed a lot just by not even having it in the bedroom. It's like, I don't need it. I don't need that reminder all the time of certain things that are happening. And all that just comes back to just being in the present, whether you're having a conversation with someone, or like I said, just walking down the street. I really feel like it's brought me back to a more grounded state and a more wholesome way to live. And you think, all of us here, let's go back, when we were a bit younger. It wasn't that long ago that we never even had a phone in our pocket or anything. And we were all connecting with other people and the environment in a more direct and purposeful way compared to what we do now. So, I think there's a lot of value there in that. I see so many photographers when I might go to an iconic location and they got the camera out, they got the phone next to them, they're doing this, and man, like that's taking you out of the moment again by having the phone there. It's distracting you and it's putting your mind elsewhere instead of in nature. So I think that's a worthwhile thing for people to, not trying to preach here, but it's definitely really helped me in a lot of ways by just, eliminating the usage on the phone and social media and everything like that.
Yeah, it's something, if I can jump in there, it's something, that I've just recently done in the last 3 months is remove all socials from the phone. And for me, it's interesting on an art perspective or on a photography perspective as well, because, I'm guilty myself of chasing approval, chasing the likes, the comments, the followers, and all those kind of things, And in the past, I've been guilty of going into the landscape thinking, what's going to get me a gold award? What's going to get me a viral image? What's going to get me this? And really thinking about pleasing other people, essentially. And so for me, I'm in a real reset at the moment, a real spring clean, I guess, over this COVID period, where remove all those distractions, Facebook, social media, as much as possible. And now I'm just sort of sitting back, waiting for the inspiration to come back in. And it's going to be just much more authentic, more pure inspiration, because I'm only going to pick the camera back up. Like yourself, I've had about three or 4 months off since I've really done anything meaningful with the camera. And like yourself, I've picked up the paintbrush and put some paint on the canvas, which has been fun. But as far as the photography is concerned, when that inspiration hits me, and there's a lot of ideas floating around my head, but when that really hits me and I get that desire and that space to get out there and do it again, it's going to be because I want to go out there and do it for myself personally, not because, and I can't see myself posting to Instagram or Facebook, again in the future too often, to be honest. I just don't, it doesn't interest me anymore. It's just this, look, for me, and this is probably different for everyone, the whole social media thing is this whole sort of gamified competition of approval and judgment. And I'm no longer getting any value out of that. In fact, every time I go on there, it's taking a little bit away from me, I think. So for me, remove that. I think that's a great idea. It's working for me as well. And then when that inspiration comes back, as I said, it's going to be really interesting because it's going to come directly from, the essence of art within myself. So we'll see where that goes with that when the time comes.
Certainly a challenge to being I guess a full-time photographer, and I know for myself, my social media is actually a key part of my job.
Sure.
So it's very, very challenging to balance that and try and keep that in check. And I've got a very, I guess, addictive personality, so that doesn't really help too much either. So there's certainly very good advice though. And I think one aspect that you can look at doing while still having a social presence without being on there is actually post scheduling and sitting down for a day, getting all your posts ready in advance and actually dropping them out there over a period of time. And, so it means that you can treat your social media as a block of time in a month, where you can actually sit down and do that kind of activity. You're still sharing your work. You're just not having to be present when it's happening. And I used to see that as a huge cop out in terms of when I was very active on social media and thought, well, you have to be on there, you have to engage with everybody and all of that. But, there's a huge, I guess, impact that comes from that too in your own personal, I guess, being present, like you guys were talking about. I was also going to mention too, I watched a really awesome movie on Netflix called My Octopus Teacher.
I was going to mention that.
Yeah, and it's absolutely fantastic, and it's really it's about a creative. I think he's a filmmaker who was losing inspiration, very similar to some of the conversations that have been happening tonight. And he went out diving, as probably he would do for his clearing the head type activity, and came across an octopus and sort of the thought struck him, what would happen if I actually came out every day and what would happen. And I'm not going to give any more away than that, but it's really fascinating, and it's really an exercise in being present, and shows that if you take that being present to a particular place very seriously, what amazing things can come out of that. So I really do thoroughly recommend if you can watch that. It's really great. Yeah.
I was going to. Oh, you go, Rick.
Oh, well, if we can, just whilst we're on the subject of talking about phones, 10 years ago, there weren't these apps with notifications. We weren't constantly getting barraged with what I call noise. There's just, everyone, I feel, is just distracted. I see it everywhere. And of course, I'm in a large part guilty as well. So there's no judgment, of course, but it's just my observations and my experience. But I go out, I see people sitting at the bus stop. No one is talking with each other. They're all heads down, buried into their phones. If there's a queue to use the ATM, people will straight away get their phone out and thought, oh, how can I be more productive? What can I do whilst I wait? Rather than just being in the moment and processing your thoughts in your head, looking up to the sky, observing what's around you. And that's really just, I guess, it's been a rapid increase towards that space. And it's really, I think, happened over the last 10 years. And just to expand on what's been said already, I'll give you one example. If I'm having a conversation with Paul at dinner, and again, I used to be guilty of this. I feel like I'm much better at this now. If I'm having a conversation with Paul and if I've got notifications set, let's say for Messenger, and I have that on vibrate, I have that in my pocket and I'm having an in-depth conversation with Paul. Paul's pouring out his heart about something. All of a sudden, there's a notification in my phone. I feel my pocket vibrate. All of a sudden, my attention has shifted away from listening and paying attention to what Paul is saying, all of a sudden to wondering, oh, I wonder who that is. And just having that internal battle in my mind to say, oh, I wonder, I'll quickly just check, Paul won't mind. Oh, gee, no, I can't. I've got to keep listening to Paul. I don't want to be disrespectful to him. Oh, just a quick little gander. I'll have a quick little look at it. And all of a sudden, I'm no longer in the moment. I'm physically there, but mentally I'm not there. And I feel that that's how damaging these constant notifications are on our phone, because they're all just reaching out for our attention. They are reaching out for our attention, and they've been deliberately designed for that purpose, for driving engagement. The more time that we are on these technologies, the better for them. And I'm of one to say that I feel like we should be in control of technology and not the other way around, where technology controls us. I mean, Adam will tell you how atrocious I am at getting back to messengers on message. It could go days. You know what? And I just forget. I just think, shit, I haven't checked Messenger for 5 days. And to me, I think it's telling me that I'm in the moment. That's not to say that I don't really love the connections and the friendships that I have formed, because the truth behold, I would not have met any of you wonderful people if it wasn't for technology. So it really does have great power. But at the same time, I feel like we need to be conscious and be intentional with how we're using it and controlling it, and not letting it control us. And what Will said about people with phones in nature, that really bothers me. I try not to worry about it, but it bothers me because I feel like they're missing out. They're shooting themselves in the foot because they're missing out on the potential of just the benefits of nature and what it can provide. And no better documentary to explain that point than My Octopus Teacher, where if you are truly observant, you start to notice all these details, and it's just incredibly rewarding and beneficial for our mental well-being when we are just in the moment. And I'll just quickly finish on this. I feel like with social media, it's created a competition. Who can outdo each other? Who can provide the best representation of their life? And this was really rammed home for me in one particular experience. I was lucky to visit Rio de Janeiro, and I was there at Christ the Redeemer, and people wait a while just to be able to get a spot where they can just enjoy the outlook over arguably the most beautiful city in the world. And I saw a young couple there, probably in their early 20s, and they were waiting perhaps all 15, 20 minutes to be able to get a spot. And I watched from afar, and as soon as they got their spot, rather than enjoying the incredible vista, they turned around with their selfie stick, they got the photo, they kept on looking at the photo, see if they tried again. They probably had 8 different takes before someone said, hurry up, other people are waiting, and they went. They didn't even turn around to see the view. So they'll put that on social media, but they were never there. Physically they were there, but mentally they were never there, and they cheated themselves.
hear people say, "Oh, what music do you listen to while you're out taking pictures?" Well, I don't often hear it, but every now and then that question comes up, and I don't know. That's just the furthest thing from my mind to listen to music while I'm taking pictures, at least out in the nature, because the nature is the music, I suppose, and what you're listening to, and that can help you explore it even more. So I always found that a fascinating kind of question that you hear every now and then, because it's certainly not the way I would like to approach it.
If I'm honest about the early stages of my photography, that taking photographs was actually in some ways its own battle towards being present, if that really engaging with a place, because I think when you're learning and the technology and the f-stops and everything else, your brain's in a very technical kind of left brain sort of space. And I guess also for me, sometimes I felt like I didn't really properly engage with the place till after I got back, and I did that through the images themselves, because I was so busy running around trying to take pictures at the time and trying to capture the moment and just suck it all up. It was almost like I had to just suck up as much as I possibly could into my camera to make it worthwhile being there, so I could share it, that I lost or sometimes was compromised with my ability to be present. So it's interesting that, and now I guess that I'm far more on top of the technical side of things, and I'm not in such a rush, and I kind of am more aware or settled with what I'm looking for and waiting to experience, that's less of an issue. But I found that for about 10 or 15 years. Sometimes I thought maybe I should just not bring a camera on this trip, because it's actually taking away from my being present, which is a little bit opposite to the way we've described it as the very vehicle that makes us being present. But I personally had a long time where I was quite challenged by that. Like somehow it wasn't enough to just be there. I had to capture something from being there as well. And it was almost like a bit of an addiction, that I just had to grab something from the moment so it would never go away. Otherwise I was afraid it would just never exist again. And yeah, it's interesting. Like I haven't thought about that for a long time.
Really. Yeah.
But it's another aspect of it. I think just reflecting on social media, I think for full-time photographers, it's an interesting one, because it is a medium to engage with clients, to find work, to sell prints, and there are other mediums as well. But it's one of the big ones, and it is the biggest visual platform in the world. And there's an innate pressure to have presence on it, and to have and to hold space in this virtual world, to be, for a lot of people and clients to consider you significant enough to hire for work. And I just have a real dance with that. Like, I think quite a while ago, I stopped sort of using social media as a real personal platform. Here's my fucking breakfast and blah, blah, blah. But, and I just mainly use it for photography and business. But at the same time, yeah, it's a constant dance. Like I feel like I don't want anything to do with it. And then I also have had a lot of things that put food on the table and have led to really amazing projects and traveling around the world through it as well. So I think it's a constant dance to find a way,
just finding
to
that right balance,
the well-being around it.
You have to deal with the bad aspects of social media. And I think that's important. I'm absolutely hopeless at dealing with some of the bad aspects of social media. For years, I've put up with people who are, friends on Facebook that are constantly negative, and only ever jump in when they've got something negative to say to me about something that I've posted or whatever. But I bring a lot of it on myself because I'm a fairly out there sort of person. But I think you have to, if you need it as a photographer for full time or just anything really, but if you need it, you need to deal with the toxic side of social media and work out how, in your own mind, how you deal with it. And there are people that will always look to bring you down for whatever reason, for their own agendas, for just because that's their personality. And I think social media has the tools to cut those people out of your life, and that's a bit of a balancing act in itself because it can spill over into real life and cause other issues. But if you can come up with a plan to deal with those people, and I'm sure, Luke, you can relate to this, I think it's going to make you feel a lot better with your interaction on social media.
It's definitely like the Instagram, Facebook have invented the mute button for a reason, and the block button if necessary, and I think you shouldn't be afraid to use it if you're following someone that's not really serving your even mind, or don't feel like they're injecting the positivity that you probably would want from a platform that you're on. So it's definitely I've definitely come across some people that have had said some pretty snarky things about some of the images that I've put up over the years, and so it's necessary to, I guess, keep on going. And that really does weigh on your mind quite a lot when those kind of events happen. I've got one account that I haven't posted on since someone actually interacted with me and sort of got me into a state that I just didn't want to take photos anymore for a while. So it's definitely not something that is the good side of social media. But it's important to not try and let it get on top of you, although sometimes it's very hard. Sometimes the people that feel like they're doing good things in the world can turn on other people, and that can be a real challenge to work out mentally. So it's always one of those things.
Ricardo just put an amazing quote by Guy Tal, the essence of which is kind of what I was reflecting on before, that you can be racing out there around taking photographs with a purpose for creating them for, I guess, for external validation, and you're kind of cheating yourselves out of a much more immensely satisfying way to practice photography, by just racing out and just to get that shot just at the key light and then racing off again to post it up. You've lost that incredible opportunity to be present.
Do you want to read it out for the guys watching on YouTube?
Oh, it's a long one.
I'll copy and paste it in the thread there.
Yeah, do that, because it will take 5 minutes to do it. But I might listen to Lukey about that posting thing, because it's kind of, there's a bit of a weight in the back of your head with social media. I haven't done anything for a while, or I haven't done this, or if you don't interact with your post, does that mean it doesn't go very far and all that sort of crap?
Well, it does mean it won't. I mean, you do need to have more. The more interaction you have with your content, the better you'll have. But I also think that it's important as a photographer to be sharing your work, because ultimately, if people aren't seeing your work, then did you take a photo at all? I mean, it's kind of the harsh reality of it. So that's I guess the next best thing, at least in my mind. Yeah.
Well, if I sort of sum up the pressures around that, I think, and this is where we're all going to be quite different in terms of what role photography serves in our lives. It's if you don't have the pressure to make a living out of it, there's a lot more freedom, I think, to just relate to it as a form of self-expression, or a way to connect people with places, or just the lighter and kind of more beautiful sides of it. And then all of a sudden, when you've got this pressure to put food on the table around that, it's a little bit more challenging to just engage with those more beautiful parts of it. And I think that's personally something I find one of the great challenges as being a living kind of working full-time photographer, is how do I find that balance? And I've been a little bit stubborn in that I've only stuck to clients and people and types of work that I personally find very meaningful or fulfilling, and I haven't sort of compromised and worked for companies or people that I don't think are serving the better interests of the world. And sometimes that means I buy a bag of frickin' rice and sit down and wait for the work to come. But yeah, I mean, some of you guys have been involved in more full-time photography, and some less so. And so it's maybe a little bit more of an outlet, a form of expression, and a balancing place in your life. And yet I sort of feel like I also have to deal of this, well, how can I use it to put food on the table just constantly? And I don't have regular income or regular clients. So it's often a weight that's just in the back of my mind wherever I am. And it puts a slight taint on my process around my photography, because it's kind of like, I'm not just always taking a photograph for the joy of it. It's also like, well, how can I somehow translate this to food on the table somewhere down the track? Yeah. And it's a constant dance. I think all artists face the same thing. I don't think we're alone in that regard. But I'd love to hear some of your thoughts about how to find balance with that, I guess.
Not so much on balance, but I just want to touch back on Luke's point about, if you've taken a photo, you need to share it, or you haven't really taken a photo. The whole tree in the woods, if it fell, did it really fall? I'm in a lucky position where I don't draw a lot of my income. Only a very small fraction of my income comes directly from the art that I produce with the camera. The rest of it comes through teaching photography. And for me, my work has become the stuff that I'm producing these days has become so personal that I really can't see any particular reason why I would ever really want to share that. Like, I'm really have to force myself to share it, because every time you share something, for me at least, and everyone's probably different, but for me, I just feel like I'm being judged. All the different comments, I start reading messages into them and all this different thing. And if I'm not getting the likes or this or that, so that's where social media for me, I just no longer get anything out of it whatsoever at all. That's not to say that I don't get anything out of photography, because I absolutely do. But for me, it's fine to just print it and sit it around here at home, or just have it for my own benefit, or in actual fact, on the mental health level, for my own therapy, really. I produce a lot of work that's dark and gloomy, and sometimes I'm just producing that. I don't really think much about it at the time why I'm producing it, but a lot of the time I'm producing it just because it's mentally beneficial for myself.
And I should qualify. I did say that very flippantly, but there is obviously a very strong point of taking the picture, because that's your own, I guess, therapy or your own interaction with the world. But I guess, and with photography, there's always a viewer as well as the person that captured it, and you can be your own viewer. So there's certainly no issues there. But I think, from my point of view, I always see that sharing is the end point, and I'm actually really poor at doing it at the moment. But it's definitely, the goal, at least in my mind. And I think it's hard to, we shouldn't be completely hard on social media in the sense that it's the devil and we need to give it up entirely, but it certainly is a something that needs to be treated with respect, in the sense like you would treat any kind of addictive substance with respect if it was used incorrectly, because it's definitely something that has a very slippery slope. And your mind can end up in places that you wouldn't have expected it to end it up in if you get overly consumed with it. So that's probably where I sort of see social media. It's definitely got a very positive point, and it can be used very beneficially. In fact, I don't know if I would have connected with any of you if it wasn't for social media. So there is certainly benefits to it, but it's all about how you use it, and controlling yourself with that. And sometimes the best way to control, to be honest, is to sort of abstain from it, at least for a period of time. I know that if I have a box of chocolates in the house, that box of chocolates is going to be gone very quickly. So if you've got the app on the phone, it's going to happen. So I totally respect that as well. But it's definitely
I agree.
Perspective. So
I think it's worth just experimenting, and if you're not doing it professionally, or you are, like for me, I do it full time, like landscape photography, and I'm the only like sole provider for the family. So social media has always played a huge role in my career. I picked up social media when I picked up the camera, coincided all at the same time. But over the years, I've just experimented with using it less, and I'm fortunate. I've never really had any negative interactions on social media. I truly haven't. But what I have found is that, and I've never even really found myself addicted to it. I noticed a few years ago that I just wasn't. It became more of a business tool than an actual hobby, a tool to, I wasn't really enjoying it at all. It was purely, all right, I've got to share this work, purely just to, from a business perspective, as Paul was mentioning. And all I've really done in the last couple of years is just experiment with, okay, what happens if instead of posting every day or every second day, whatever it is, what if it's only once a week? Let's see what happens. Or what if I start a whole new account and just start fresh, which is what I did, because I had an older account that was being used to do some influencing work, and it had a larger following, and I was getting more DMs in there and stuff that I just wasn't interested in doing. And I kind of drew a line in the sand and said, I'm just going to start fresh with a new account and just share the work that I want to share, my pure, the stuff that I want to do and nothing else, and just see what happens. And that's kind of the road I've taken. And at the point now where, like there is that part of you that says, oh, Paul said it pretty well in the back of your head, I haven't shared anything for a while, should I? And that's something that doesn't really go away. And when you've been doing it for 8 years straight, that takes a toll after a while, to have to wake up every day and think, okay, what am I going to post today? Where's the caption? Got to reply to the comments. To do that for 8 years straight, like that's a pretty big burden,
Wow.
That's really, and I'm sure you guys can relate to that. So for myself, I've just said, I'm taking control of this. I'm going to scale it back. And if the work stops coming in, then I'd rather have less work and have to do another job than have the burden of having to force myself to use this, because it was just soul draining. And it wasn't, and it sounds silly because there was no, like I said, nothing negative. There was no negative comments or anything, but I just found it, because it's your own photography, it's self-promoting every day. And I hate promoting myself.
Yeah.
I hate telling people I've got a
does?
workshop coming up. I don't want to tell you I've got a tutorial sale. I'm the worst businessman ever. I'm a photographer, but unfortunately, when you do this full time, you can't. You got to have 5 different hats on. So I just had to find that right balance for me, and it's still a learning process and everything like that. And I do enjoy. And Luke said it well. We wouldn't even be here if it wasn't for social media. That's how we all know each other, essentially. So it's just finding for yourself that right balance. And I guess if I was going to anyone was going to take anything away from what I'm saying is, just give it a try and don't be afraid to try different things. Don't think, oh no, my account's going to die. My old account I use once every 3 months, and I posted something on it, that whenever I did the last time, and the engagement went through the roof. A video got 2 million interactions on there, and I thought, that's, that was unforeseen. And then, okay, I just left it, because the other thing as well, guys, I don't know about you, but it doesn't, interactions, likes, comments, whatever, does not always add up to a sale. That's for sure. That video that I mentioned, they got 2 million views. There was 10 website clicks out of 2 million views in the video. So you learn over time that, okay, it's, followers and likes and everything doesn't mean anything. And when I started a new account with, from scratch, people thought I was mad. They're like, you've got one with 180,000. Why are you starting a new one? And I've been fine ever since, 3 years on. And so there is definitely a correlation between having a social presence and being able to establish yourself, but it's definitely not the be all and end all. And it is a tricky one because everyone's going to be different here, and it depends how long you've been in the industry and all that type of stuff. But I think it's worth just testing the waters and saying, maybe I will scale back a little bit, or maybe I'll do the post scheduling, or just try different stuff. If you feel like it's affecting you in a negative way, that's for sure.
And I feel like it's important to also lean back on just the innate kind of more innocent side of what it's all about. Like I get really excited to share something awesome that I just did, or somebody's amazing work that I came across, or this incredible exhibition I just walked into the day before, or this amazing quote that I came across, and it has a wonderful capacity to open people to connect with beautiful places and other styles of work and different ways of thinking and different influences that can have really positive effects on people's well-being. And there's a lot to celebrate, there's a lot to express, there's a lot to enjoy, there's a lot to share with. There's incredible communities you can be a part of that do serve often for many people, and me included, some really, really positive roles in my life. So I just felt like I just needed to counter that a little bit, like because I sort of like, you can call it the devil in some ways, but people say money's the devil, but money's just a form of exchange. It's just one that we've chosen at the moment. It's what you do with it and your intention behind it that really has the great power. And there's a lot of incredible people that are sharing. Like I saw David Attenborough did one post on Instagram and it got like 2.8 million followers or something. And it's kind of like, it was one of the most beautiful messages I've ever seen. And to think that is going out in the world at such an important time to reflect on a man that I personally deeply respect. It has a really incredible influence, potentially, on people's well-being and awareness, and the things we want to get on top of to keep a sustainable life and the well-being of the planet in the forefront of things. So I still feel like it potentially has a really powerful, positive role in people's lives as well. You just need to be very self-aware, I guess, around its influence.
I think that's the key.
Not
point.
afraid to have the guts, like Will said, to just call it and say, you know what, the balance is tipped. This is not serving me. It's serving me worse than it is giving me good. So let's just cut it. And there is a sense of that. Well, I think I noticed when I've had a career in wilderness adventure therapy, which is very, very directly recognizing that spending time in nature and wild places is possibly the most powerful thing we can influence our well-being with in a positive way. And when I first started, there was no phones at all. And I remember later in my career, as Facebook came in and Instagram and phones became a regular part of young people's lives in particular, when they realized we were going somewhere without reception, they wouldn't even come on the trip because they were so addicted to this form of communication. And I think it's going to be interesting to navigate it for young people in particular. Some of us older fellas have had large periods of life without it. And we've got this fallback of knowing that the life's not going to fall apart if we bloody don't have a phone. But for young people, they don't necessarily know that because they haven't really lived without it. And it's easy for us to say that. But I think in a way we need to sort of be present to the world that they've grown up in and the world that's evolving around in the future, and find a way to be kind of realistic about that dynamic. I guess as a father, Will, you must, as the kids are getting older, you're gonna have to, and Adam as well, and Nick, of course, you have to find that balance, I guess, with the role of that in young people's lives as well, because it's pretty massive, in positive and obviously negative ways as well. But it's here and it's not going away.
I can certainly identify. Sorry, Nick. Can certainly identify with what Will was saying around promoting yourself and being burnt out by having too much interaction on social media, and so I personally also created a new account that was not me anymore, so I could still put images out there, and rather than celebrating technically myself, I suppose, because it's on my own account, I could celebrate the place rather than myself, and I found that very, very rewarding. And so it's something I'd encourage as well to maybe consider, if you're wanting to interact on social and not wanting to be, in the promotion sort of side of things, and that's a really beneficial way of approaching it. And for me, I always think about what we do as photographers is actually landscape photographers is sharing the beauty of the world with people. And if I didn't have that, I think, as a purpose, I don't know if I would be able to share images on social media, because to me that's kind of what makes it, gives that sense of meaning in being able to put that out there. And I also see our role as photographers almost like as beauty chasers, and it's amazing to be around a bunch of blokes that, and women as well, of course, that really celebrate beautiful moments in nature and auroras and sunrises and sunsets. It's, when you really think about it, it's a pretty incredible thing to be getting really giggly and excited about those sort of moments, and it's a beautiful thing. So being able to share that with other people, and
it's a real, especially during the lockdown,
so cool.
Hearing from people that were trapped in an apartment, and the only nature they had was a pot plant to sniff, and that really kind of reminded me of how important our images can be to people. I guess what's hard though as well, and you guys will relate to this, is you want to share your work and inspire people like that, and it's a real blessing. And then one day the algorithm can change, and then you're now hitting half the people you were last week. And it's not that you're trying to do it to get business or anything, but you can't help but feel a bit of a negative emotion to, oh, okay, now it's only reached half the people for no reason, nothing you've done. It's just purely the algorithm. And I'm not saying, the likes or whatever. It's all about the likes, but it does, when you think, man, I can't even reach the people that choose to follow me. It's not even that starts to get tiresome after a while. You guys have probably seen it on the YouTube channel even.
Oh yeah, well we often talk about it'd be good to have more followers and this and that, and then we always just sort of think, well, we never really did it to get followers. We just did it to have a chat, and if people are getting something out of it, then they can follow along. That's awesome. But at the end of the day, the numbers aren't the important thing. It's the quality of interaction and the what we get out of it. But yeah, you're right. It's certainly, sometimes you think, oh, we're putting out good stuff. Why aren't the numbers there? But
if someone said I enjoyed it, and you think, oh, it's great, we've inspired someone, and then next week the algorithm just says, nah, they're not going to see it this time.
Yeah,
you just can't help but feel
you
a
can't
bit
just
bummed
pick and
about
choose,
those
and then they put
scenarios.
the notification bell in on top of all of that as well.
Kick the algorithm's ass out the door. I'm just aware we've sort of about an hour and a quarter through the show, and all being photographers, we haven't even looked at a single photograph yet. Does anyone feel drawn to pop a few on the screen? I think
Nick was just going to raise something before we do that. I think Nick had something. Did you have something there, Nick?
I did, but now that Paul said that, I think we should look at some images, and then I'll come back. But I do actually want to talk about something fairly slightly different tack on what we've been talking.
Yeah,
but we'll do it after we've seen some images, because
awesome.
I think that
you just pick your moment, Nick.
Yeah, I will. Rick, you've got some images prepared, haven't you?
Yeah, I do, Nick, but make sure that you do get out what you want to say, because I think it's very important that you do.
Yep,
no dramas. All right, well, just give me a second. I'll share my screen.
Yeah, and I reckon Adam in particular have incredibly deep reflective processes around their work, and they're two people I know personally that really deeply inspire me about how the process of creating an image can be representative of so many things and as a form of expression. And I think I wrote some of the other day how much I admire Adam in particular, and that he just doesn't give a shit about what other people think. And in that big wide arena awards, he's like, this is what I want to express. This is where I want to go. This is just bloody out there, but it's where I'm at. And I don't give a shit if you don't like it. And that's so refreshing, because you don't actually get that a lot. And it's something I totally love about you guys, and Ads in particular. I've always admired that, mate. When you all of a sudden there's 5 pixels on the bloody screen, and everyone's like, "What the fuck is that?" And I'm just like, "Yeah, Ads." And of course, the judges just don't get it, but it's like, well, it's where I'm at. It's how I'm expressing myself, and I get really inspired by people that have the courage to just be super authentic in their expression through their image making. And Ricardo, your work just takes me so many places, my friend, and it offers so much opportunity for people to bring themselves into the images through the different ways you can interpret it. And I think it's a real gift that both you guys in particular have. So I thought it'd be nice to just, I guess, celebrate that aspect of things, and maybe talk a little bit about how it's maybe helped you, that level of self-expression, or what that process of creating images like for you, and maybe share with people kind of how the role of that serves in your life.
Yeah, sure. I know that if I'm ever doubting myself and having self-doubts, you're the first person I call, Paul, because you're always so good at pumping our tires up. I just feel like I need to just permanently have you as my shadow wherever I go, constantly just reaffirming myself. And I echo what you said about Adam. I find it personally inspiring that his level of authenticism, how authentic and he remains true to himself as an artist, and I really admire that, and something that certainly provides me with a lot of inspiration on my own path. Before I share a couple of images, because obviously I want to give the floor to the other guys, I guess for me, obviously, I've made it clear what landscape photography gives me, and it is my meditation. It's my Dylan Toll said it well, release valve, and it's that reset button, the reboot that helps me restore a balance in my life. And I guess I started out capturing nature's beauty, and I felt like I went through I guess there was a point where I wanted to try and infuse what I was searching for into my images. And so I began being more conscious and intentional about the what I wanted to infuse into my images. And so the majority of my work aims to portray or convey what I seek out in nature, and that is silence. Like I said before, I'd love just leaving all the noise behind, all the demands, all the requests, and just finding that liberation and escape into nature. And so I'm looking for space, I'm looking for silence, I'm looking just for a release from our chaotic, noisy world. And so a majority of my images do have those elements into them where they're very, very light on subject, lots of negative space. And really, that's what I'm seeking. I'm seeking that silence. And my images, they don't have impact in the sense that they speak quietly. And that's essentially what I'm out to achieve and what I seek out. But the images that I'm going to show you, they're stepping away from landscape photography, and they are more illustrative. And perhaps wouldn't even say that they are landscape images, but certainly they, at the time, helped me to convey emotions that I was feeling, and having that ability to imbue and communicate what I'm feeling, what I'm experiencing at the time, and just letting that out through an image and using that as an outlet. It was incredibly healing for me at the time. So these two particular images were part of that healing process where I was able to convey what I wanted to do, what I wanted to release. So just bear with me and I'll share my screen. Just let me know when it's when you can see it.
Yep, there we go.
All good.
Yeah. So this image here, I had my friend Alex take this photograph. And Alex Wise, that is, and I was just feeling, like I just wanted to escape all the demands and the requests and the stress, that I was enduring in my professional life at the time, and I wanted to convey that, and so I dressed up in a suit and bought a briefcase from the op shop, and so I don't carry a briefcase. I'm not that white collar. I created this image with the idea to convey that form of escapism. A man who's he's at boiling point, and he's just looking out into the horizon and just wanted just to escape, and perhaps that introspection and contemplation nature that comes from it. I guess I'll share that image that has been used as the profile for this image, which is very in a similar vein. And I've titled this image "Consumed." And for me, every single branch is a metaphor for someone's arm trying to pull me away from my attention. Just every branch extension of every arm of the branch is another request, another demand, another demand for my time and my energy, and I wanted to try and convey this in this image. And so I've got the man that's partially buried to try and convey that he's losing the fight, and that he's feeling encroached, and he's being essentially buried. And the added element in this image is with the man's fist clenched, is I guess symbolizes the man's frustration. And so I created this image with that idea in mind. I do have a couple of others if I've got time to show another one.
Go for it, brother.
Yep.
Please.
I've got this one here, which doesn't perhaps show. Sorry, I'll get rid of those little things. I think I did that last presentation with you guys a few weeks ago with my cursor on the image, and I bloody cringed when I replayed it. I said today I must move the cursor away from the image. This for me was, at the time, I just needed some clarity in my life, and Will touched on it earlier about doing something that you perhaps found soul destroying, And certainly the path that I was on some years ago was for that for me, where I wasn't feeling any sense of contentment, fulfillment in what I was doing. And so I wanted to create an image which tries to convey someone having the courage to take a leap of faith. And for me, that towering waterfall that is Iguazu Falls represents how daunting of a prospect that this may be for anyone who wants to take a leap of faith and completely change what they wanted to do. And then what added to this image is the mist in the background, which makes the future uncertain, where there is no clarity in what's ahead. But just to have that leap of faith to jump off and allow that river below to take you onto a new uncertain path into the mist and see what happens. And I try to encapsulate those feelings that I was experiencing at the time in this image. Yeah. But look, all these images, whilst I was processing them, and perhaps whilst I was at least thinking about the concept and to get the images, for me, that whole process was a process of healing, because I was immersed in what I was doing. I wasn't thinking about anything. And that is really the real power of art, irrespective if it's painting, photography, sculpting, anything. I just feel that art is really powerful healer and does great things for our mental well-being. And I think it shouldn't be seen as a luxury, but a necessity in our life. And I think we should be obligated, for those of us who do seek some benefit in art, to make time for it.
Well,
That's me.
well said, brother.
Beautiful. Yeah, well said, mate. It's excellent.
I guess that's what. Oh, you go, Nick.
I was going to say if Adam had some images to share as well, but what were you going to say, Luke?
I was just going to say that's kind of what art is sort of putting yourself into your work, and that's what I've always appreciated about your work, Rick, and also Adam. I know you do that very well as well, and in terms of creating those scenes that can illustrate feelings and emotions that you might be having at the time, or contributing to a greater narrative. So yeah, it's really valuable work.
Yeah, beautiful, Rick, beautiful. Just a little bit in response to all you guys saying that I don't really give a shit about what people think about my work. That's the end goal. That would be the end goal, absolutely, to get to that point. I think that is the end goal of art in general, is to get to that point where you've got this incredible creative freedom to just pour yourself out without any concern for anyone else. But my little social media hiatus at the moment is due to the fact that I do care too much about what other people think about my work. And so I feel very vulnerable when I share. So I'm just avoiding that for the time being. I'm sure that will come back at some stage. So I'm going to be a bit of a hypocrite now, and I'm going to share some work after I just said that I don't enjoy sharing work, but special occasion. Let's do it. All right. Is that going to be? Can you guys see Photoshop, or are you still seeing the Zoom? Or
yeah, no, it's there. All good.
I put the crescendo as the first slide. I forget you saw that one. That craziness. So interestingly, Ricardo was saying, or he mentioned embarrassingly, that he gets inspired by myself. And in actual fact, Ricardo is probably, well, not probably, absolutely the number one inspiration that has helped and guided me along this path to finding a deeper level within art. And look, the more research I do and read books about, particular accomplished artists and whatnot, the vast majority of artists that become well known or whose work that I look up to have found this place of soulful work, if you like. And this is the first image here, and I'll just brush through some of these earlier ones a little bit more quickly, because there's a little bit of a story I want to tell with some of the later ones. I've only got 4 or 5 here, but we'll brush through these. But this was a particular time when so I left school. Let me take you back a couple of sentences there. I left school when I was 17, and I did 17 years, roughly 17, 20 years of building. And I didn't like building, for one of those days at all. And what ended up happening was the anxiety started to build up, because I was forcing myself to do this job that I didn't really enjoy. So there was underlying anxiety, but it started getting worse and worse and worse because the vast majority of what I was living, what my life was not enjoyable. So that ended up leading to exhaustion and depression at the time. But I quit that job and my wife and I decided to sell everything that we owned and we went traveling around Australia. And so this was 1 year into what was to be a 2-year trip. And I made it from Sydney all the way over to Perth in that first year. And interestingly enough, I quit the job to sort of escape anxiety and depression in particular. And I get over to Perth and I'm feeling the most depressed I'd ever felt in my life. And that was a kind of an interesting scenario. And I think in hindsight, looking back, it was somewhat of a hangover. You know, it had taken me 15 years to get to the lows. And in this current world where we expect everything to happen really quickly and the solutions to be solved really quickly, I was expecting that, you know, I would be happy and back to my normal self after a year of travel. But it wasn't to be the case. It ended up taking me much, much longer to bring myself back out of there. But the point with this image was it was the first one where I sort of stopped caring to a certain degree about what social media was going to think. And I just poured my soul into this dark, some might say lonely, cold, isolated type image here. And the interesting thing about it, like, I'd never really got all that much recognition on social media. Sure, I had the followers, I get a few more likes and a few this and a few that. And I'm going to talk about competitions, which I don't tend to enter anymore either now, but this image got my first gold award. And it was interesting for me because it was the very first time that I'd actually put something deeper, something of myself into an image. And then all of a sudden, I was being rewarded and recognized at a higher level than what I'd ever been awarded before. Now, that was in Perth. We had another year to travel. So we're traveling around. I get back home to Sydney, and the 2 years travel was supposed to lead to becoming a professional photographer. Now, that was to turn out to be a lot harder than I thought it was ever going to be. So when I got back to Sydney, keep in mind, I'd sold my house and sold all my possessions, and I'd spent all my life savings on the 2 years travel, and I still wasn't earning a single dollar from photography. So when I got back, I had to go back into the building game and sort of face those demons to a degree. And there wasn't time for photography at that point. I couldn't find photography and I wasn't feeling overly inspired. So I put the camera down for about 3 months, I think 3 or 4 months. But over that time, similar to what Will was talking about with his current 3-month layoff, I was thinking about photography the whole time. And I was thinking about, and I asked myself these two very important questions. And I think they're probably the most important questions I ever asked myself in my photography. This light bulb went off and I started thinking and wondering and asking, what do I want my work to look like? But more importantly, what do I want my work to say? And after that 3 months off, this was the first image I produced. And still to this day, 10 years down, it's probably the image that I'm most known for, which is a little bit depressing, isn't it? 10 years down, I still haven't managed to top it and produce something any better in a lot of people's opinions. In my opinion, I think I might have found a deeper level. But this was a very popular image at the time, and also went on to win several photo competitions and be part of portfolios that did very well. So now I'm getting this reinforcement. The first image that I poured my heart into somewhat subconsciously awarded very highly. The first one that I ever did consciously after answering those questions, I didn't tell you what the answer to that question was, did I? At that particular point, anxiety and depression were the deepest emotions in my life, and with some encouragement and some support from people like Ricardo, I decided to explore that aspect artistically, and this is the work here that came from that. Now, let's just flick through and move along. This one here, interestingly, again, this was another one that was created in a real dark place, somewhat subconsciously. And it's interesting that the two moments, or the two images that were derived from those two dark places and produced somewhat subconsciously, are almost identical in their composition and their subject matter. That one single lonely building in the center of the frame, which I see as potentially myself. In this image, it was in a period of particular darkness. So when I say this was created subconsciously, if anyone has ever, and I'm sure many of you have, ever felt that deep darkness, well, for me, myself, I go into this sort of fantasy world where I'm not grounded and I'm not thinking clearly, and it's all a bit fuzzy and a bit blurry. So this image here was created in that exact state. And I thought to myself, you know, why don't we try and, you know, put some paint on the canvas, so to speak, and create something in this dark mist and see what happens. And this is what came of it. And none of it was really conscious thoughts. But when I look back now, there's a lot of metaphors. Rick, why didn't you tell me that I had the cursor over the pictures? That's all good. But there's a lot of metaphors in here, like the blurry foreground could be a metaphor for that sort of instability that you feel when you're feeling that way. You got the reflection, self-reflection is very prominent for me. Giving myself a hard time when you're feeling that way. Again, the branches, a lot like the branches in Rick's photo. For me, they're branches that are kind of caging you in, you know, in this cage of anxiety, if you like. And the overall darkness, as you see there, maybe relates to the overall mood and the depression. There's an interesting one when I was workshopping recently that someone pointed out to me. There's something very interesting to do with the house. And it's the fact that it has no door. So there's another metaphor for being trapped. So there's just chock-a-block full of metaphors. There is a little bit of hope in this image. You might be able to make it out on the screen there. There's two little birds kind of nestled up side by side in the darkness there, giving each other support, if you like. And that's the support of the friends and family that I'm very lucky to have. Let me just go along here. And this is my most recent body of work. And I've been working on this for about two years now, and I've taken a break the last 6 months. I've still been considering it and thinking about it and working through ideas and workshopping ideas, but there's about 10 or 12 of these, and they're all very blurry, again, relating to that headspace, that lack of clarity, that darkness, the loneliness. There's all sorts of little metaphors in such a simplistic image here that only really has one or two elements. You know, the blurriness, the tree itself doesn't look overly healthy, may symbolize, you know, exhaustion. As we come through, this would be a later image in the series, more positive, wanting, the butterflies for me are very significant in representing change, you know, transforming from the darkness to the beauty. Metamorphosis, if you like. And then the one I sort of showed you earlier, so this project, this current body of work is, as I mentioned, about 3 years in, 2 or 3 years in. And about 6 months into that process, so let's say 18 months ago, I started experimenting for no reason whatsoever. And this is a little interesting story about where art can take you if you are really present, as we spoke about before, and really delve into what it is that makes yourself, I suppose, which is, for me at least, where I want the art to come from. So once again, somewhat subconsciously, I had this urge. I've got a little boy, Lachlan, who's 6 years old, and I just love watching him draw. There's a freedom, like he doesn't care how many likes he gets on social media for his stick figure drawings, right? And I just want to get to that level. Like he just picks up crayons and just draws. And there's a freedom to that art that I think as artists we lose as we go through the education system, or for whatever reason, we get told that stick figures are not a desirable form of art. You know, we've got to improve, we've got to get better, we've got to do this. And then we discover that once we want to become an artist, that, well, hang on a minute, I want to get back to that level. I want to get back to the point where I can just draw and put down on canvas whatever comes out without a single concern, because it's fun and joyful. And that's exactly what my little boy does. So I started experimenting with these stick figures and stuff on these very dark images, which gave this juxtaposition between joyful, and I suppose the worries and concern of a mid-40-year-old like myself here, the dark and depressing, lonely sort of images that I've gotten to. Now, the reason I wanted to bring up this story is because, as I mentioned earlier, the last 3 months has been pretty dark again, pretty dark time. I'm coming back out of it again, thankfully, which is great. And it's been a bit of a spring clean for my mental state these last 3 months. And I've been really delving down into what it is and some of the triggers. Now, interestingly, through different means, I discovered that somewhere, well, let me, just before I give you that last punchline, as a mid-40-year-old now, for the last 5 or 6 years, I've been wondering, and there might be a few in the audience that are wondering this too, I've been wondering where the fun in my life went. You know, there wasn't too much fun. It was all, you know, competition in photography and competition and having a successful business and keeping up with the Joneses and all this different thing. And I'd kind of lost the fun to a certain degree. And so these stick figures were my little artistic muse kind of coming to me, whispering in my ear, hey, get back the fun, get back the joy. Remember when you were a child and these things didn't matter, all that kind of thing. And then recently, through these last dark 3 months, and I've been doing a bit of therapy and a few alternate therapies, I discovered that I had lost my inner child about 20, 30 years ago. And then when I get to mid-40s, I'm starting to think, why do I feel so dark and glum and depressed and anxious? Well, guess what? That little inner child that I'd lost within my own soul to a certain degree, guess what he had with him? He had all the fun and the joy and the spontaneity. And he took that right with him when I lost him. So, you know, recently, it's just so interesting that 12 months before I found out about this, and now I'm working with my, with my son in particular, on finding the joy and bringing the fun back and bringing my own inner child back. And as I said, I've been playing with canvas and splatting paints and having fun and not caring about anything except just having fun. And it's just been incredible. But the fact that art can come to me and say, hey, you know how you've been missing your joy and missing your fun, or you've lost your joy and lost your fun? It's still there. You just got to make an effort to go back and find it. So I just think that's absolutely incredible that when you become really present and really engaged, and I suppose to a certain degree focused on creating art, for myself, focused on creating art that is absolutely from my inner soul, that these really special and amazing things can start happening. And for me at the moment, a lot of this work is still too raw and still too vulnerable to really be shared on social media, because I don't need the critique that comes with sharing this work. It's just very personal, and it's a stage in my life that I'm going to look back on really, really fondly. But it's just a very personal body. So that's enough of me being sharing and vulnerable. Who's next?
Thanks for sharing, mate. I really got joy seeing that last one there.
Thanks, mate. Yeah. I'm getting a lot of joy from what my son and I are producing at the moment. Actually, let me just show you one little. Do you want to see a little whiteboard mock-up of something I'm working on, just quickly?
Yeah, please.
Please do. Please.
This will only take 30 seconds, guys. Let me just. All right, we should be here. Now, this is very, very raw, but it's just a concept. Often I'll jump in Photoshop and sketch out concepts. And this is about introspection, if you like, and wanting to become light and free like a butterfly. I don't want to give away all the metaphors there, but hopefully you can see a couple of different images within that image there. So it's very raw. I only sketched it out yesterday, but it's something I think has some potential.
Absolutely,
to be worked on in the future.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful insight into your process and how things work for you, Adam. Really enjoy that.
Yeah, so for me, this one is, you know, you can't be light and free and completely joyful until you look right deep in and resolve and be content and completely love everything that is yourself, which is, I think, the goal that, you know, that's almost the meaning of life to some degree, if we want to get philosophical about it. But, you know, if we could all just be completely content and happy and joyful and free like a butterfly, That would be the absolute end goal, I think, for most of us.
And Adam, that butterfly is a metaphor for a renaissance.
Absolutely.
Beginnings, a change, a shift. So in many ways that symbolises where perhaps you're at.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah,
Incredible.
transformation. And
Yep.
the best of all you can be is such a big part of that symbolism.
Yeah.
And it takes that kind of self-reflection to do that. I think you need to understand yourself, your good sides and your shadow sides and your dark sides, like you've got to embrace them and come to terms with them and find a way of being with them in order to find that balance of well-being, because it's a part of who we are and it's a part of the world. I certainly spent a lot of time trying to avoid the dark things happen and the not great things that happen in the world, but it's just kind of how it is. We have that all within us. We're all capable of magnificent things and we're all capable of dark things. And the more we don't hide from that, the more we embrace it, the more we consciously use our creative expression to get things out and that otherwise would bottle up inside us, the more we can use it for our well-being and to support other people too.
Adam, I couldn't help but pick up on the image that your most popular image that you've created, which you created about 10 years ago, was the last image that you created before you started listening to what I had to say.
Well, I remember.
There's your mistake. Start listening to me and never been able to get more popular images.
That's not what it's about.
That was one of my first introductions to Adam, because I was in the room at APA judging the Emerging Photographer of the Year, and there was, I don't know who the hell's work it was right in front of me, but I was like, that dude's gonna fucking win if I got something to do with it. And then I didn't see it until a few years later, I think.
Yeah, a couple of years later. Oh, actually, it was the next year, I think. Yeah, the next year.
Yeah.
Awesome. I guess I could move on now to what I wanted to talk about. I really want to talk about how we can help others and how we can recognize or look for when others are having issues. And I guess I'll tell you a bit about myself that we've alluded to a few times on the show, but I haven't really delved into it, and hopefully it'll show you where I'm coming from. So my full-time job is as a crime scene examiner. So I'm a police officer and I work in forensic services and I go to crime scenes. So going to crime scenes means run-of-the-mill stuff, going to break-ins and throwing fingerprint dust and that sort of thing about. But I do a lot of photography as part of crime scene work, and one of the things that I have to go to very regularly are traumatic incidents. So things like car crashes, sudden deaths, including suicides and murders and that sort of thing. And I see lots of really horrible things, which is fine. That's what I've chosen to do. But it's become increasingly important to me, seeing how my colleagues react and how general members of the public react to trauma, to be able to recognise and see when people are going through a hard time, and having the courage in yourself to maybe talk to them about it, and see if you can lend an ear. Now, I think one of the important things that you don't do, and something I've learned, is you don't necessarily offer any solutions to what they're going through, because you don't know exactly what they're going through, and you don't know what might trigger something with them. And it's a very man thing to try and offer solutions to other people's problems. And it's something I used to do all the time. I used to think, well, what can I do? How can I solve this person's issue? How can I help them out. But I think the most important thing is to listen, to recognise that someone's going through some trauma, and just offer that ear. And if they ask for help, it might simply just be that they want to meet up with you and have a coffee, or they might just want to offload, or they might tell you to go and get stuffed. You get all manner of reactions, and I'd like to see us as photographers and in the photographic industry, I guess, recognise or try and recognise when people are going through a tough time, and I'd like to discuss with you guys, how can we approach other people's well-being? What are the things that we should do? I know it's pretty deep sort of thing, but it's really important to me. In my profession, unfortunately, we have a very high rate of post-traumatic stress disorder, and that can lead to some very serious outcomes, and something that's very close to my heart at the moment. We had a very recent suicide of a colleague that's affected us all deeply, and we're all really feeling it. So what are your thoughts, guys, on how can we help others? How can we recognise when there's issues, and what can we do to do our bit, if anything at all, to sort of help them on their way?
It's a really big question, Nick, and I think we probably need a bit of time to reflect on that on some levels. But I think like I often carry images with me. Like I went over to Flinders Island with Luke and Andrew recently, and I had a box of prints with me. And I know usually, and I do that when I travel, and sometimes they're just as thoughtful gifts, but sometimes certain images have a certain presence in it themselves. And by their very nature, they're uplifting, or they're gentle, or they're opening, or they're inspiring, or they have, like a lot of Adam's and Rick's work, they have a symbolism to them that can take you places and maybe visually allow things to move or allow things to settle just by the nature of what they are. So I wouldn't sort of forget, like I had an image in my room. It's the only one of mine I've had in my room for about 10 years. And every time I look at it, I just felt calm, and I just felt grounded, and I just felt peace. And when I started to be more conscious of that influence of the imagery around me, I've actually now engaged, and I have a huge piece in the ICU at Launceston Hospital. And the whole purpose was for that imagery to create this really gentle, healing, supportive space, just by the nature of the colors and the design and the content. So it's a more indirect way, but that's sort of maybe one way to understand the influence of having images around you. I have one of Will's incredible images of far-reaching part of the world, and that's kind of has this magical nature about it. It's transcendent, just being around it. And we're all aware of that, I think, unconsciously, but it's nice to be more consciously aware. I think having a career in wilderness adventure therapy and working with recovering addicts and street kids and single mums and people with incredibly challenged and very traumatized lives, I started recognizing the power of imagery in terms of changing their relationship with the natural world around them, engaging them with place by teaching them to use a camera to do that. Like that might be another form of like introducing them to photography, or taking them out with you one day on a walk and doing some shooting and seeing if they engage with that as something that could be potentially be therapeutic.
Yep.
And then I also got very conscious about it in that career, and that I recognized the power of that imagery for people to shift their own self-identity and the way they saw themselves by creating imagery that represented a moment of incredible peace or connection, that then became an anchor point for these people to come back to later and relive that moment of connection and groundedness and peace or calmness that they found in nature. So I started documenting the experience photographically of the therapeutic nature of being out in wild places. And then I actually became even more conscious about it. And I said, well, what kind of images do you want to see? and they'd actually watch me at work, and we'd work together and then come up with different forms of expression around the photographic process, so they could then come back with something that they could present to other people that might even shift the way other people see them. And so I started, it's a bit late to get into the show, but I did actually bring a body of work around that. That might be another show altogether. But I guess it's maybe being quite open around the different influences that taking photographs, having beautiful imagery around you, the meditative present process of taking images, like there's lots of different maybe ways that I feel like I've used that. And I always have a little stash in my car or somewhere where I can just gift it to someone at the moment. It just feels right. And there's something that I know about that image, or the frequency of vibration, the energy, the feeling, the color in that image that it just feels right for that person in that moment. I remember Ignacio really surprised me once, where he said, there's this lady who wants this image of yours, and I don't know who it was or what the story was, and I just followed along, and he didn't tell me what it was. And it was actually an abstract image of Lake Eyre, but it had this beautiful symbolism of a mother and child. And it turned out this woman had been doing ICU for years, and she'd almost given up on being able to do it. And there's something in this image that gave her hope. And she wrote me this incredible letter about how much this image went to her, and I just gifted it to her. I don't know who she was or what the story was. And who would have expected that engagement with a photograph that had nothing to do with my intention in terms of creating it and how it impacts other people. So it can really surprise you, sort of how imagery can connect with people and influence their well-being. So I'll shut up for a minute and see what other stories that some of the other guys have, but that's maybe some of my sharing. Nick, I'm happy to flesh that out later, my friend.
Yeah, I personally think if you've noticed someone's become uncharacteristically quiet, or has sort of in inverted commas fallen off the face of the earth, or they just don't seem to be present anymore, it's a pretty good sign that something's going on. And probably if there are another photographer, the least confronting thing you could do is just say, hey mate, we should go out on a shoot. And I honestly think that's probably the absolute best thing that you could ask someone that's into photography to do. And sometimes that it might be that they are sort of a bit sick of the photos, and maybe a coffee is a good idea. But I think if there's anything you could do in those times, if it's another photographer you're thinking of, offering to go out on a shoot, and just sort of organizing it all for them or what have you, just say it's going to be here and this is how it's going to go. I think that's just a really great way to connect with people and get them out and doing something that takes their mind off where they're at, and and it really would lift their mood. So I certainly know that from personal experience as well. So that's certainly something that I think would be a really good idea.
Yeah, there's a lot of value in that face-to-face communication as well, because it's so easy to, if someone reaches out or you reach out to someone, it's very easy to lie through a text, no, I'm all good. But when you can put yourself in their presence, that's where people really, they'll let their guard down and they'll tell you how it really is. And that can be very hard to do and I've done it to people and they've done it to me, like, just how's it going, man? And when you look someone in the eyes and you really ask them that question and you can see through it all, and that's where people will open up. So I think any advice I would give here would be on what Luke said, reach out, but try to organize to be there with them. Don't just, how are you going through a text? Because 9 times out of 10 people, I've done it to people. Yeah, all good. Yeah. It's too much energy to open up, But if you can come around, just arrive at their house. I'm here now. I'm boiling the kettle. Let's have a chat, and you don't have to let them know what you're there for or anything. But once, you're in the presence with someone, they can finally let loose. And I know for me, that's helped in the past, where just having that conversation with loved ones and not being ashamed to, and it really goes a long way. And just knowing someone's there to listen. And on my journey, my wife has had to put up with, the darkest periods in my life. And the main thing that she was able to do is just be there. She couldn't actually do anything, but just knowing she was there just meant so much to me. Just knowing that there was that person there, even though she couldn't really necessarily do much, that really went a long way. So just if you can be that for somebody else, I think that would really help big time.
Yeah, I think you've absolutely nailed that, Will.
Yeah, you have.
It's something I've learnt in me trying to be there more for others. That really it is the face-to-face communication where people sort of tell you how it really is. Like you're right, you don't get it necessarily on the text. And look, without being negative, and some people can only just communicate via text, or they're in a different state, and that's just how it is. But it almost feels like the term slacktivism, if you know what I mean, where which has been coined to talk about people, just typing some social media status and thinking that's going to save the planet from climate change, that sort of thing. It almost feels a bit like that, where I'm quite conscious that something such as a text message might go some way, but it's not the same. It does not replace the face-to-face contact and really sitting down and having a decent conversation. But just on that, and this is something I have had to deal with myself, is not taking on, and this has been a problem most of my life, but not taking on other people's problems as a big burden on yourself. You have to get a balance. If you get too emotionally invested in other people's problems, you can cause yourself problems. And I think that's important to remember as well. You need to be able to create your own space, so you're not completely emotionally invested in something that someone else is going through, because it can be really difficult for you, and that's something I actually really struggle with, because you want to be able to help everyone with all their problems. I mean, it's part of the reason why I do what I do as a police officer. That's part of the reason you join, because you want to help people. But there has to come a time as well where you have to look after yourself. So just be aware that if you do reach out, and please reach out, just be careful that you don't take it too far. And maybe you can talk to some of your other friends and say, look, hey, John isn't having a great time at the moment. He found it really helpful when I went out on a shoot with him. Maybe you can reach out to and have a chat. And that way you can sort of, in your own mind, share that small that burden a little, or something like that, and think of it that way. I mean, respecting other people's privacy is important, of course, as well. If you've been told things in confidence, you don't go and spread it around the place. But maybe that's something you can talk to the person who you're concerned about with, and say, look, we've got this other great friend that we talk to all the time. Do you mind if I just tell him about this conversation? And you never know what will happen. But yeah, it's pretty close to my heart, this issue, and I think photography is such a great community, and I really think we should all look out for each other as best we can with what emotional resources that we've individually got.
Nick, I think you said it really well, and good on you, or kudos to you for using this forum as an opportunity to share that important message. It's really a great and very important message that I think we all need to be more conscious of, I feel. And I think you said it well about that practicing that self-care, because I feel that we need to give ourselves the permission to look after ourselves, so then we can be there for the others. If we take on too much of a toll, then there isn't that longevity, and we can't be there for people in the future. So just to try and create that balance where we're not taking on too much, so then there is that longevity and we can sustain being that person, that shoulder to cry on in the long term. Ultimately, that's much better for everyone. But just getting back to your question, I feel that we can all be advocates for encouraging people to use art as a powerful healer. I've seen countless artists that have discovered have essentially saved their life through picking up a paintbrush, where they've had traumatic pasts, but they've discovered art, and they've really, I guess, survived thanks to the powerful healing qualities that art have. It goes back to what we said earlier about being in the moment, getting out of your mind, escaping your mind, and just being in the moment. And over time, when you do that enough, then you start to heal, and I feel like you're able to move on by being present more in the moment. As I say, I think time heals all wounds, and I feel that art is a real powerful healer in that regard. And I think we should all be advocates, whether it be picking up a camera, a pencil, a brush. It's just that time to immerse yourself in something. That meditation, I think it's an absolutely wonderful thing. If anyone's like me, I can't do meditation. I am so shit at it. I try and meditate using Smiling Mind app in the morning, and I try, but I can't. Just the chatter, I find it very difficult to quieten that, because the mind's just racing and just trying to think of thoughts and grab on to things that and take you away from just concentrating on your breathing. But then, when I'm processing, 2 hours can just vanish. Or if I'm out in nature, paying attention to the details, listening to the sounds, I find that time just evaporates. And that's when I started to understand that's my meditation. That's the tool that is giving me what I'm desiring. Not doing breathing techniques, but just immersing myself in the things that do force me to be in the moment. And that's my meditation. And I feel like it's so powerful. And we need to share that and encourage others to explore it who haven't already.
Yeah, well said, mate. Well said. And I'm a little cynical for traditional meditation myself. I'm just a cynical type of person, and meditation doesn't really sit that well with that sort of personality. But you're right. You're getting out there with the camera or without the camera in nature, looking at those small details. I mean, we've been over it all night, talking about the appreciating things that others might miss, and that really is. Now I think about it, now you've mentioned it, that really is my meditation. And certainly with my background and what I do for a living, that is what the camera does for me. It's my medicine, it's my healing. It gives me that escape away from anything I might have seen or felt at work or anywhere else, for example. And yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, well said.
Maybe you could also try some yoga or something like that. And they could probably go down pretty well.
I'm not flexible enough for yoga. Like, I'm not really a yoga person either, or a Tai Chi person, or a CrossFit person, or anything person.
Couldn't imagine you with your hot towel, Nick.
I'm a landscape and wilderness photographer, and I think that's enough for me. Well, having said that, I mean, I also sing, which I do a lot of. But
he's an awesome singer.
But not busting a tune out tonight. But that again, that's another form of art and expression that really does help me. And yeah, I think you're right. If we can somehow influence people more towards creative art, I think their mental state would be better for it. And it's something I've mentioned to colleagues before about, have you tried photography? Do you enjoy photography with your phone, or do you want to learn something more? Maybe you'd come out with me and I could show you a few things and see if you like it. And I guess, for someone who's not into photography, it may open a door.
When we had the lockdown here in NZ back earlier in the year, like a pretty strict lockdown, I ran a local competition for the community just through the Facebook, because there's a community page where I live. And I just wanted to encourage people to get out, because you're allowed to walk around the town each day. You could do some exercise just if it was walking only. And it was good because, just just to try and encourage people to, all right, you know, we're trapped in the houses for minimum, ended up being like 8 weeks, but just to get them out and admiring those little details, as we've spoken about a few times. And yeah, it was really cool to see all the entries come in, and just the way that people were observing, whether it was the backyard or down at the lake and the mountains or whatever it was. And yeah, I don't know, but I hope and trust that it might have helped some people, you know, during that time, because man, it's such a cool, powerful thing, isn't it? And we're all really fortunate to have it in our lives. That's for sure.
That's a great idea. The local Facebook page for your local area.
Mate, most of the time it's whose dog is this that walked in my front yard, or found this wallet down the road. It's awesome though, because there's about 3,000 people that live in this type of area. But yeah, the page is just perfect for those little bits and pieces. Or found a stray sock down at the skate park. Who owns this? And it's pretty good.
I might steal that idea though. I think that's got some real merit. Will good thinking. I'll have a think about that. Well, how are we going for time? We're looking a bit over.
Yeah, I think it's probably a nice natural point to conclude, unless anybody has any sort of last things to say. I guess if not, look, thanks so much, all of you, for joining us, and also to Will for staying up an extra. He's got 2 hours on us, so thanks so much for that, mate.
Pumpkin o'clock, mate.
Yeah.
Yeah, but look, it's been an awesome discussion, and just so very privileged to have all of you guys join us tonight, and I hope that for those watching that you got something out of tonight, and I guess if there's one thing you can know, that certainly not alone. There's a lot of people that have all sorts of things going on in their lives, and you might see certain things on social media and see that they can be very accomplished in certain areas, but people still have their own things going on in the background, and so it's everyone's a real person at the end of the day. We also probably just want to mention about next week, and next week we actually do have a special guest. We have Ken Duncan on the show next week, so please tune in at 7:30 next week at the same time, same day, and we'll have Ken on, which will be an absolutely fantastic show. He's even putting together a presentation especially for the show, which is awesome.
Teaching Photoshop, is he? Or
you're going to be taking cheap shots in the audience next week, Adam.
Maybe.
Ken's showing us the new sky replacement tool in Photoshop.
Oh yeah.
Ken, if people don't know Ken, he's definitely one of the most prolific and famous, and I'd probably no photographer alive in this country that sold more images and books than Ken Duncan in this country.
A great character.
Phenomenal character, big personality, very progressive, and he's still just prolific at this stage in his career, and so he has so many stories and viewpoints and values, that really sort of gets you moving and thinking, and definitely feeling alive. He's a big character, and it's a real privilege to have him on the show. But I wanted to spend a bit of more time thanking these guys first. Some of these guys are very dear friends of mine, and I particularly felt really, really moved and really special, Nick, with your sharing tonight. I think that was really
absolutely
and beautiful and powerful, and it's the very thing that opens up possibility for engagement, possibility for people to reach out and connect, possibility for healing to happen. It requires that self-awareness and the courage to put it out there in the first place, that it's okay to not be okay. We say those words, but you really got me thinking tonight about the reality of that, is being out of my own little bubble and thinking about, well, shit, so-and-so has been a bit quiet, maybe it's time for me to reach out and just say, hey, what's going on, brother? And it's not about fixing people, but it is about connecting, and it is about letting them know they're not alone, and finding the space to just be with them and to listen, and not judge and not try and, make them right. It's okay to not be okay. And that's where I think the beginning of healing can start. So thank you, my friend, for reminding me to get out of my own little bubble and just be aware of how I can support my friends and my brothers and my family. And yeah, in funny ways, this technology, as weird as it is, it does help us connect with people further away and farther away easier than we ever have before. So yeah, thank you, gentlemen, for your courage and your art and your being and who you are. That's why we invited you on the show tonight, because you're already sort of legends in my mind in that regard. So I was certainly been really surprised by the kind of some of the things I've felt and gone through just listening to you guys. So thanks so much.
Paul, I'll be happy to settle on 10% of what you pay Ken next week.
Yeah.
Yeah, mate, the credit card's getting whacked out, I'll tell you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much.
All right.
An absolute privilege.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah,
Well, thanks so much, all, and we'll see you
lots of
again
love,
next
Dave.
week. Until then, have a good one. Bye.
Bye-bye.